Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar with Lifetime Adoption. My name is Libby Deniston, and joining me, actually, we have sort of several of Lifetime's team behind the scenes here, but speaking tonight, we will hear from Veronica Hoffines, who is one of Lifetime's birth mother coordinators. And what that means is that she works with the women who are just thinking about adoption, all the way to helping those women when they are ready to move forward with their adoption plans and they choose adoptive parents, and then she works with the adoptive parents that those birth mothers invite into a match, and she helps see those matches through to completion too, and supporting everyone involved in the match through the process and after. So why that's exciting is because tonight's webinar is, we're calling it an open adoption Q&A. And so we thought, what better way to get some answers about some of the questions that come up when it comes to open adoption than to hear from someone who works every day with both sides of an adoption match, the birth parents and adoptive parents. So we'll hear from Veronica tonight too. We may also hear from Kim King. She's on in the background, and she supports a lot of our families who are just starting to look into adoption and researching Lifetime's program. She has extensive background and history here at Lifetime too, so I know that she may chime in, but we'll try and cover as many questions as we can, and you may even see us type with you, without saying anything on air. So if you want to submit a question for tonight's Q&A, you can look for that questions box. And also, if you have a comment, we love seeing the comments too. If you have something related to what we're talking about that you've already moved through before or experienced with that, you can chime in with your comment, because that is really helpful to the community we have here tonight too. So before I officially welcome in our guest, I just also want to say that I welcome all of you to this webinar. We have a mixed audience, which is really going to be fun to see the different questions and comments come up. So some of you might just be starting out even just thinking about adopting a baby. And so we just want to say welcome. It's good that you're here. There are no wrong questions when it comes to learning about adoption. You can never learn too much. Education is so important. And that if you maybe have never even spoken with someone at Lifetime, you can reach out to us. You can talk with us Monday through Friday. Just call 1-800-923-6784, or you can email adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. And then some of you may be researching Lifetime's program. Maybe you've already applied before. We do have a free application. You can get to that at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. And maybe you have already connected with someone behind the scenes like Kim. Maybe you had an email with her, or you've talked with her on the phone. Um, if you need more information about how Lifetime can help you, please know that we have a whole team happy and ready to help you get the answers you need. But also on the webinar tonight, I know a lot of familiar names here because we see you pop up on Lifetime's private webinars as currently waiting families. So I just want to thank you all for taking time to be here. And just remember that, we'll cover as much ground as we can. And when it comes, especially when it comes to open adoption, we all of us here at Lifetime could share so many different stories that would take up hours and hours and hours. So maybe there will be some things that we'll just touch on that you might need a little more information about. Maybe other things might be like, wow, I never even thought of that before. And you can let your coordinator know, gosh, that really stood out, or I would love to hear more about that on a future webinar or something. So we just want to welcome all of you and thank you for making time to invest toward your adoption today. So Veronica, thanks for taking time out of your day to come be on our webinar tonight.
Well, you are welcome. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to be able to share, anything I can to help families that are considering adoption, considering Lifetime, as well as our current waiting families. So anything I can impart, I'm happy to do so.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we don't really get to hear from you much on our public webinars, so this is a fun treat.
Yeah. First for me, I think.
It might be a first, or at least a first in a really long time. So, if any of you listening have a question, we have some questions to kick off because some of you took time to submit those when you signed up for the webinar, which is great. But, please know we encourage your comments and questions. So look again for that questions box. Um, I thought we'd kind of start at ground zero here because even when you're already waiting to adopt, you hear other people talk about what they think open adoption is, or you hear it interpreted by other people who might think they know, or maybe you heard myths or outdated stereotypes about it. And sometimes even when you think you already have an awareness or understanding of it, it can start to look a little cloudy. And so I think it's good just to start at sort of the basics of what are we talking about when we say open adoption?
Okay. Well, as a birth mom coordinator, one of the first things that I share with a birth mom when we're talking about our services and what we can offer is open adoption. That's always just a eye catcher for birth moms. You know, it's really like, well, maybe they've been contemplating it, and then they learn that open adoption is really a beginning. And that's kind of how I address it with birth moms. And so you had mentioned this earlier, Libby, and this is exactly what I tell birth moms is, you know, we offer open adoption, and the definition of that is that you get to choose the family. You tell me what type of families you're looking for, and then I will send out those profiles best matching what you're hoping for. That's part of open adoption. The other aspect of open adoption, birth mom, is that you get a chance to talk with your family, to build a relationship with them, to get to know them as much as you would like to, or as little, between now and when your baby is born. Or if we're talking about an older child, kind of the same thing. As much as you feel you'd like to get to know this family before you decide to take the next step. So those are all those definitions of open adoption that we share with our birth moms. And then, of course, the biggie is after the adoption is completed. Well, let me step back a little bit. So one of the other aspects of open adoption, too, that we share with birth moms is, you know, if time permits, and that it is feasible, you know, we hope that maybe the adoptive family can even travel to where you are, birth mom, before you have the baby, so that you guys can add to that relationship building by, you know, having that one-on-one. So those are all aspects of open adoption. Certainly after the adoption is completed, we talk to birth moms about what that looks like after the baby's born, after you go home, birth mom, from the hospital, and the family leaves the hospital with the baby. You know, what happens now? So, you know, the basics that we talk about with our prospective adoptive families and our waiting families as well are letters and pictures throughout the year, as well as once a year visits. So we
Sort of
let
as
birth moms know
an
that.
average, right? Like,
Yeah,
because you
the
were
kind of
saying,
the
well,
basics.
there are some moms that don't want any contact, and then there are some that over just the course of the match, um, they sometimes decide, wow, this is so much more comfortable than I thought it might be. So maybe I could get updates a few times a year rather than just a couple, or so it kind of ebbs and flows. I always like to compare it to just a a deep relationship. Like when you first meet someone,
Mhm.
you don't you don't call and text with them, like, you get to know them, and maybe you get together awkwardly, and then you have conversations. Like it kind of just unfolds over time. But Veronica, you brought to mind something that I've experienced when I've helped birth mothers, is that they often have some of the same questions about what adoption would look like that adoptive parents have. Like um, they are often just as unsure, like, what do you mean by that? And, you know,
Mhm.
how would that even look? And like, who are these people that I'd be in touch with? Like it has to just kind of start little step by little step. Um, and
Mhm.
I think even it might surprise all of you because you're all, potentially hoping to adopt, it might surprise you to know that Veronica and I both have stories of talking with women who are thinking about adoption for their babies, who actually say to us, I don't want anything with this adoption to be confusing for my baby. And so that's an opportunity, like Veronica was saying, where we educate her about what that can look like, that it might surprise some of you to hear that these birth moms, they're not in a situation where they want to help you raise the baby. They want to make sure their baby's safe, loved, um,
Mhm.
accepted, taken care of, and in a situation that she may not be feeling she's in a situation in like an inability to provide at that time. Um,
Right.
so I love that you taught us about open adoption from the perspective of how you help the moms when they're first calling, just thinking about it. I think that is such a unique way to look at it. Um,
Mhm.
I even heard one of the attorneys we work with frequently. I will never forget this when I first started with Lifetime, and I remember him so simply saying, "Open adoption means you know where your baby comes from, and she knows where her baby went." Um,
Mm.
and that kind of that kind of defines why open adoption had to come into being. Veronica, in your experience, because I think that it's easy to understand why a birth mother would potentially want open adoption, why she would want to have a say over who adopts her baby, that she would want to know that this was her plan, that nobody was making the choices for her and telling her what to do like it was decades ago. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that some people could see the benefit to why even a child might want to know their birth history, like where did I come from and what's the other side of my story. But what are some benefits to adoptive parents when it comes to open adoption?
Mm. Well, I hear from families oftentimes they get a chance to know the health history of the birth parents because they have this openness that if it was, say, something that wasn't foreseen or had no idea, maybe the child has a rash of some type and maybe there's a question from the doctor, is this possibly, are there any hereditary, whatever. With an open adoption, you get a chance to get a little more detail on the health history of the child, of the birth family. And I know that's a huge part of open adoption that comes from the adoptive family's perspective. Certainly, too, your child, your child will gets to know who he or she is, not only on his, birth family side, but of course his loving environment, his family that he is with. But how wonderful for a child to be able to know his full circle of family. And that, with families that I've heard from, they are just excited to know that they can help their child feel complete by knowing their full background, and it's not a mystery because as there are biological children, they know pretty much their background. For children who are adopted, it's a blessing for them to be able to have that knowledge. So they have their biological background knowledge, and they have their loving, family that they are with as well. And of course, they know who their family is
Mhm,
that they've grown up with. So I think those are a couple of key aspects with open adoption
mhm.
that I've heard from families, loving
Yeah.
that they've been able to, know the health history and provide answers to
Mhm,
questions that their child may have. Not in the beginning, certainly, but as the child gets older, in say preteens especially, it's really great for the parent to be able to say, well, this is your story. These are your birth families, that type of thing. I think that's really wonderful for them to have.
Well, even so that emotional connection to just knowing that other part of your story, and but also what you were saying is helpful for the adoptive parents about having the health history. Eventually, that child
Mhm.
becomes an adult, and they will need to walk around with their own knowledge of their medical history. And
Mhm.
I've seen some really cool stories here at Lifetime where even a birth mother who may not want to keep in touch or have regular ongoing contact throughout the child's life, like maybe she pulls back some, but sometimes she'll call us and say, I'm not really in touch the with my child's adopted parents, lately, but I did just find out that, my mother has breast cancer and I wanted to make sure that they were updated with this medical history or something. So
Mhm.
so even birth mothers see the benefit of passing that information along, um, that that it's valuable, even just that nugget to not be able to, to for someone who was adopted to be able to show up at a doctor's office and not have to just draw a line through the family medical history and say not available,
Right.
to know
Right.
that. So,
Yeah.
but certainly the emotional is also something that more and more counselors and therapists and adoption advocates are really talking about because you hear, I mean, some of you may know people who were adopted, and if you've really talked to them about their story, they may have shared that a question that they always had was, why was I placed for adoption? And
Mhm.
with open adoption, they get the opportunity, even if they never hear it directly from that birth mother, to just at least have a little bit part of that story that you get to know as adoptive parents because you knew that child's story from the beginning. And that, we're just tonight, I just want to clarify too. Veronica and I are talking about adoptions where that that birth mother is voluntarily placing a child. We're not talking about what that could look like if she had her rights removed by the state and a child removed from her care. That's a different story. What we're talking about
Mhm.
is when women call us, they have 100% rights over their child or their baby, and they are thinking about adoption by choosing people to adopt that child into their family. So she gets a say, and that child has a different story than say children out of foster care. So I just want to make sure we're talking about that too, because that's the only place of expertise we can talk about here, because we don't do foster adoptions. So um,
Right.
we're talking about private adoptions. Um, I love that. I saw a comment come up here from one of our new adoptive moms who says, um, if it is, oh, yes, thank you, Rebecca. She says, if it's good for the child, then that should be the desire of the adoptive parents too, in her opinion. And
Mhm.
I think that's one of those things that sort of unfolds. I will say, both you and I could share stories about how we actually end up hearing from adoptive parents who say, my child's birth mother's like the only other person on the planet who gets as excited as I do about the milestones. So, like when they get that first tooth, or they take that first step, or they have that first day of kindergarten or something, that they're able to share a photo or share an update like that, that they know that that child's birth mom is a lot of times out there just going, oh yeah, and like they get it because they love that child too.
Mhm.
But Veronica, what
Right.
would you say? Because you've helped families in all stages of adoption planning, so it's really normal, I think, to hear some of the things. Like some of the harder questions that we've heard before are, will I ever feel like mom and dad if I have an open adoption? And then another common question
Mhm.
that kind of plays in with that is, does open adoption make it easier for that birth mom to come back later and turn the adoption
Mhm.
over, like get the baby back? How would you answer those harder questions?
Well, you know, I think with adoptive families, um, it's the obvious that they travel to the hospital and there it all begins. They've not had those previous months to, kind of even start building, I suppose, that relationship. But I think it naturally occurs once everyone leaves the hospital, once the family is discharged from the hospital with the baby in most cases. One of the things that we remind families is during that interstate process where the family, has to wait before they get cleared to return to their state to go home, which that's in most cases. Sometimes families are blessed to be able to adopt within their own state, so they're not working through the ICPC process. But during that time, that family, that's their bonding time with that child, because it's mom, dad, and baby. If a family has older children, we really encourage them to try to find care for their children at home, so it can just be mom and dad focusing and bonding with baby, and to be able to be there and be available emotionally for birth mom at that time as well. So that's a great time for the family to be able to really, start that bonding process during that wait for ICPC. And so, for families to be able to start connecting with that child right from the get-go, that's a really great time for them to be able to do that. And I think that it just starts to naturally occur. It's really this is my new word, an organic thing, where it just organically just builds on that relationship that you have with your child, and you evolve into mom and dad. It's just, I don't think anyone can really probably explain it as best as when you are in that position, when you are actually going through those hours and days of bonding with your child.
Yeah.
You become mom and dad, and so that whole other side of it with your birth mom and your open adoption, that really becomes secondary. That's really hopefully evolves into, honoring your birth mom by having that open adoption with her, and that you become less concerned that she's there to parent, to co-parent. And
Mm-hmm.
to kind of go a little bit off track, Libby, you had mentioned earlier about something about that, about birth moms maybe wanting to co-parent. I'll tell you that rarely comes up when we are talking with birth moms right from the beginning. They're not they already know, birth moms already know that adoption is not co-parenting.
Yeah.
And if they do call and they think it's co-parenting, that's like 1% of those calls that we get. It's a very, very small percentage. So, be encouraged, adoptive families, to know that these women already know adoption is a permanent placement of their child,
Mm-hmm.
and that we're helping to educate them and you to know that it's what it is it's a beautiful beginning of a relationship. It's not an ending. It's not an ending for her, and it's not an ending for you. It's just hopefully that it develops into this extended, these are your extended family members,
Mm-hmm.
birth mom, maybe her mom, and that's what we hope happens, is that building of those relationships of that extended family.
Yeah, well, and because I saw a question come in a little bit ago, it said, so can we get to know her before the birth? And yes, most women are calling hoping that they will be able to place their baby, right at the hospital, right after birth. That a lot of times they will even say, I'm not prepared to bring this baby home. I want to make sure that my baby leaves with the adoptive parents I chose for him or her. Um,
Mm,
so you get that opportunity, whether it's weeks or days or maybe even a few months, to get to know that woman who's chosen you for her child. But then, like you're
mm-hmm.
saying too, it doesn't just stop there once the adoption happens. Now, unless she wants zero contact in the future,
Right,
um,
right.
you're going to have all the information that we knew about her and her pregnancy through that match time, but also like the possibilities are endless. But I know for some of you that thinking about that, let me just say, it's weird for any of us to think about having a lifelong relationship with someone that we don't even know yet. Um, and birth mothers feel that way too. That's why your adoptive parent profiles, the profiles that you put together with a website or in print, that those are things that Veronica and her team are using to help these prospective birth mothers learn about parents who are waiting to adopt. And it's often that, Veronica may have a 40-minute conversation with a mother who calls the very first time. She'll put together a packet, and part of that packet will have profiles of lifetimes families in waiting. And then they'll call back and sometimes say things like, I didn't know it could be like this, or I didn't know there were people out there like this. And suddenly
Hmm.
you're putting a face to a concept, and for her, then now it turns into, okay, I could picture adoption with these people, not just some nameless, faceless adoptive parent, but actual people with
Exactly.
names and homes and photos of their lives. And then on the other side, now Veronica, like when you are working with a mother and she's decided, okay, I want to start a match and I like this family. You and your team take a lot of time and effort to call those adoptive parents and say, I'm working with a woman, here's everything I know about her. And so you're introducing them so that they're already
Hmm.
set up for this opportunity to kind of continue getting to know each other. But again, it takes
Hmm.
time. Even in really fast adoptions, there's still those moments of being able to pause and ask each other questions and get to know each
Hmm.
other. Um, so there was a question I wanted to make sure we included here. It was in the sign up form for the webinar. Um, uh, oops, where'd it go? I love the way they said this. How do you keep boundaries with the birth mother while still making her feel welcome?
Hmm. Very thoughtfully.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, so, um, it can be a delicate balance for sure. And, we're here to help you when and if that comes up. And, what's wonderful about Lifetime, having been in business for 32 plus years, having staff that's been here for decades, is we do get calls from families, completed families, to ask that question, and we're here to help. And, so it's not a black and white answer because we really would want to know what the circumstances are. What's going on? Are there any issues? What boundaries are not being met, or what boundaries are being broken? How can we reel her back in so that this relationship can continue, on the loving level. So, I think it's really just being honest with your birth mom as much as you can. Um, we know that safety is number one for sure for your child, and so, you know, let's say the child's safety is not in question. It's really just about baby birth mom is texting me every day, and I thought it was going to, subside and kind of tail off a little bit as time went on. And really that's what typically happens, and that's what should happen. And so if a family needs a little bit of help trying to get that, message across, we can do that. We can help her. We're not going to go into it right away and say, hey, we got a call from your family and they're like telling us this. We don't, we really do
We'll
it in a
feel
more
out where she's
delicate
at.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We have our scholarship that we can offer birth moms, so that's a great kind of lead in just to say, hey, I just want to check up on you, see how you're doing. I haven't seen your application come through, wondering if you're going to take advantage of it.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of my lead in for my birth moms if I need to reach out to them on behalf of a family. And then, at some point the open adoption comes up, I'm sure. Either she may mention it or I will say, so how's it going? Is everything going good with the family? Are you getting pictures? And then just kind of that opens up the whole subject to be able to then talk about in general. Well, this is how we see it. This is really how we hope that that the post-adoption communication, is going, and
Hmm.
encouraging our birth moms to, really get going, for
Well,
lack of a
because
better
a
term.
lot of times they have goals. So when they're thinking about adoption,
Yes.
they usually also share with us about their situation, but also where they thought they were headed. So a lot of them will say, well, I had just got a job and now I'm pregnant again and I'm having a hard enough time finding a sitter for my, night shift for my 3-year old or something, and they're just sharing their whole circumstance. But also they're usually
Mhm.
saying, but I always wanted to go back to school or look into having this kind of work or trying to advance in my company for this. Um, that having another baby added to their plate may inhibit their ability to reach some of those goals, which would benefit maybe their family they're already raising. Um,
Right.
and there's many reasons women choose adoption. I mean, that could be its own webinar, um, but I think too, like what you were saying, Veronica, an important thing to remember is that Lifetime continues to be available to both sides, that birth mother and the adoptive family, so that
Mhm.
as you're navigating, especially when the open adoption is so new and you didn't have very much time to get to know each other, or maybe it's just now she's given birth and she's going through a lot of grief, processing the hormones, trying to get back to her goal setting, back to the life maybe she even had before she was pregnant. There's just a lot of adjustment going on her side, but we also know there's a lot of adjusting going on your side as a new parent, a parent to a new baby. And so it's good for you to keep in touch with us because sometimes things come up. You might call and say, she seems like she's really struggling. Has she reached out to you? And we might say, well, we've tried, but she won't, she's not returning our call. So we're really glad that you said this because now we're going to try and find even another way to get her some support or some counseling or some help that she needs. But
Mhm.
definitely, like what you were saying, um, I always like to think too, we kind of live in a time, Veronica, if I texted you tonight, now I can say this because I know that you and I have talked about texting before, but like, you're not the kind that drops everything to go run to her texts, but I have friends
Mhm.
that like you can be out with them if they hear their text messages go off, like it's like squirrel, shiny object, and like so they drop everything. They drop the conversation they had with you, like they think it's priority. And so we kind of live in this world where there's this increasing expectation that if you get an email or even a phone call or a text message that you have to like drop everything in a hot second and respond. And I think it's good because where adoptive parents are coming from on that level of feeling like, well, I really need to honor and respect that she's reaching out to me, they also need to know it's okay to take a breath. It's okay to look at your text message in half an hour after you've gotten that diaper changed and you've washed your hands and you've had a chance to sit down and actually read it, maybe even think about how you respond, that these birth moms aren't typically expecting you to just drop everything and like respond immediately to any kind of contact like that. But if
Libby,
there was a
sometimes,
boundary concern though, like if there was a boundary
yeah,
concern, then that's a
right.
conversation to be had, whether that's with Lifetime or you may even find that it's okay. Some adoptive parents have told me they felt comfortable enough to just say, we've noticed that you initially said you pictured the ongoing contact looking like this, and you it's been different than what we expected. So do we need to readjust? Like, what's going on and just listen to her. Um,
Mhm.
there's different ways to approach that. But to make her feel
Well,
welcome, I love
sometimes,
how you said the thoughtful thing, because every birth mom's different.
yeah,
That's the point.
yeah. And what's interesting is sometimes birth moms do not even have a clue that they are in breaking boundaries. This is just their normal, you know, mode of communication, and as often as they communicate, it's just normal for them. So maybe they don't even realize that it's it's way above and beyond what a typical person would do, other than maybe a millennial type of thing. So
Right.
sometimes it's just, like you said, a matter of just saying, hey, and it's okay to talk with your birth mom, to say, hey, let's get on a schedule. I think it would really help us because, we're really trying to, take on the parenting seriously, and, we really need to focus on this. And, what do you think, birth mom? Do you think that we can maybe get on a schedule of some type? Maybe at
Yeah.
the end of every other day, I can reach out to you and let you know how the last couple of days went. And that's what I had shared with one of my families recently, because they were having some boundary issues, and that's exactly what I encouraged them and suggested for them to do, is to maybe start off with, hey, let's try to do this, kind of reel her in and get her on a little bit of a schedule. Nothing much, but just something, so it's not at
Right.
at a whim. And then, build up on that. Build it to, okay, now we're going to do once a week, now every other week, now once a month, until you're at a point where you're going to be comfortable with it. But like I said, sometimes they don't even know. They don't even know that they're um, that they're being excessive, because that's just normal for them. So
Right.
sometimes it's just a matter of kind of saying, hey, let's maybe wait till the end of the day, because I've got this, that, and the other, and I don't typically look at my phone all day anyway,
Yeah,
that type
just
of thing.
the expectations, like setting
Mhm.
expectations and following through with that. I think that ties in really well with, I'm not even sure how to put it into a question, but it is so important that anyone who agrees to an open adoption honor that commitment to their child's birth mother, that you don't just tell her what you think she wants to hear so you can adopt and then drop her, because they're afraid of that. Um,
They are.
the women that we talk with, they will start out saying, I've heard this before, and they may share a story about someone they even knew, who
Mhm.
felt abandoned and just sort of like took the baby and ran, and like she was left in the dust, like she didn't even matter. And Veronica, what would you say is sort of like the typical feeling that you see come from adoptive parents towards that birth mom as time unfolds? Like, how do many of Lifetime's families view their child's birth mother?
Um, it's actually a beautiful thing what I see. I see that those barriers are being knocked down, because there's that, again, that relationship building in most cases. And as we get to know someone, we naturally want to reach out to them and share. And so that's what we see most of the time is, the family really cares for their birth mom. They are, are so blessed that their birth mom chose them, and they want to have an open adoption with their birth mom, is what we see.
Yeah.
They may start off with, okay, now what do we have to do with open adoption? What's it all about? And so, you kind of go through the basics. And we are there as birth mom coordinators to help you, the adoptive family, and the birth mom to work out, um, those expectations, so that at least by the time that the baby is born, everyone's on the same page. There aren't any surprises. Our paperwork asks that specifically, what birth moms want in open adoption.
Mm-hmm.
We go over that paperwork with the birth mom. If it's anything above and beyond, what we know our families are typically open to, we'll talk to birth mom about that. And most of the time, if it's beyond what we define open adoption, then and we talk to the birth moms about it. Most of the time, and you know this, Libby, they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, whatever. I just put that down because I didn't know."
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, none of it's
So,
written in stone. The same thing goes for, you briefly touched on, like, one element of open adoption today is that she can decide her own hospital plan when she gives birth. And I think a lot
mhm,
of adoptive parents are usually surprised to hear that those moms who are choosing adoption often want adoptive parents involved at the hospital. Um,
mhm,
but she may also not know exactly how she's going to feel. So some of that may kind of, you know, be on the moment. Like, right now, I really want your company. Right now, I really need some space, and so for you to just be
yeah,
flexible and to let her know, look, we want you to be as comfortable as possible. So we'll be right out here. You tell us when you want
yeah,
us. And then other times to be ready and willing to just be there for her when she's, if she wants you to be the first one to hold her baby, consider yourself blessed. Like, that's an amazing gift that she wants to give you as the new mom or
yeah,
dad. Um,
yeah,
but but again, they don't always know. Just like you right now, even if you're actively waiting to adopt, it's really hard to picture what that's going to look like because you don't know who she is yet. Um,
mhm,
and so, I mean, like, we could give examples all day of, like, there are birth moms who are funny and really lighthearted and just sort of off the cuff, and you might be talking to them going, wow, like, this doesn't seem hard for you at all. But you may talk
yeah,
with others who are like really tearful, but they're solid in their plan. Like, they know that this is what they want to do and they're grateful and they just, but they're taking it really deep. And so you get to know her individual personality, not just her plan, but you get to know, like, how is she moving through this so that you can respond too. And she may also recognize things in you as adoptive parents, like, you're also really funny and lighthearted, and I really connect with that. There could be this thing you have in
mhm,
common. But if you're not sure, like, if even if she's been really funny and lighthearted throughout the match, but then say a month after that baby's born, she seems like really heavy-hearted, um, it's okay to call us and say, she's so different now than when we were talking with her before. I don't quite know how to respond. Like, should I still be funny? What should I say? And we can walk you through that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
let's see here. I was trying to scan some of these questions and comments. Love that we could talk about expectations. I think that's the biggest. I would hope that that's one of the biggest reliefs when it comes to thinking about having contact with your child's birth mother over time, is that she's not just showing up at your house saying, "Hey, let's go get lunch." It's not your
mhm,
mother-in-law, um, and that you get a say. You get to make that plan. In fact, there was a question earlier that said, "What is the best way to facilitate or plan
mhm.
visits with our child's birth mom?" Like after the adoption, when she wants to get together or what. So what have you seen
Right.
working for some of our families or some of these adoptions over the years, Veronica? Like, what does that visit usually look like, and how does it usually come together?
So usually it is a once a year thing. That's a typical. Nothing usually above that, um, and and typically what we hear from families is that it's a collaboration of the date, the time, the place, and where each party um, makes their own plans to get to that meeting point. Um, and typically, the meeting point is what I find is it's usually kind of a in the middle. So, and then the other part of that is the family will actually travel to where birth mom is. Maybe it's because they know that could be a hardship for birth mom. Maybe they just want to do that to make it easier for her because she's got other kids that she's parenting. But typically it's a middle ground, somewhere in the middle between where both family or both parties lie. And that it really is one of those meetings where everybody comes together and, spend their time together. There's no expectation on the birth parent side that they're going to, go and pick up the child, the baby, and
Right.
have the baby for the day kind of thing. I never hear
it's not like a
that.
joint custody visit. It's not
Right.
like if you were divorced and your husband or your wife were taking the child for the weekend. It's not visitation. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a visit with her. Would you say
Yeah.
like usually lunch, like a couple hours kind of thing? Maybe they spend the day together.
Yeah.
Some of the really, really comfortable relationships, like they spent the day together at a theme park or
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, like you said, it's planned. Just like most
Yeah.
most of us in this day and age. It's kind of funny. I heard somebody joke about doorbells. Like nobody uses doorbells anymore because everyone sits in the driveway texting the person they're visiting, "I'm here," like tell me you're ready for me to come in. Um and most of us don't just drop by houses anymore. And it's no different with open adoption. Like you will know um
Mm-hmm.
that even if you live in the same town, um, like even in our small town where our office in California is, there's still a lot of people. I come from a big family and I hardly ever ran into people I knew, like every once in a while you did, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly it's more likely that you're going to adopt from a woman outside of the area where you live, which means it's even more important to have that plan in place, that you can't just be a last minute, hey, what are you doing tomorrow after church? It'll be, um, you know, hey, we're maybe she lives in an area that you like to travel to once a year. So you may just kind of wrap that into it.
Exactly.
Like, hey,
Yeah.
we're taking our annual Disney trip in May. We'd love to come see you. Are you available? Because we'd love to kind of plan it around then. And she might write back and say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really swamped with finals right now, so the end of the month would be better or something. So she also
Yeah.
probably wants the plan too because she's living her own life as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also
And sometimes what I've heard too from families is they've taken into consideration her her extended family, like her other children, and so they, like you said, they decide, let's go to a theme park because we're going to bring our older child, and it becomes again that whole extended family time together. So it's birth mom and her kids, it's maybe your older child, and you guys go to a local park and you guys spend the day together, have a picnic, and it's just one big big fun time together. And know too that what we tell birth moms is exactly what we share with you, the adoptive family, in terms of those visits, in terms of open adoption. So if a birth mom is saying, I want once a month visits, we give them the definition of what our families know visits to be, which is once a year. Now, I had a family recently that I called because this birth mom liked them specifically, and she wanted something much, much more than, than what the typical of once a year is. So, in those cases, we'll share that with a family. We'll give them a call and give them an option to say, yes or no, and this family totally opened up, which was, it's amazing. And we want to give our families that opportunity, in most cases, to be able to say, well, even though we were a no on that aspect of our preferences, we're willing to open up on whatever, if we're presenting something to you, the family. So, but yeah, we tell our birth moms once a year, sometimes maybe twice a year, but our families all know it to be once a year. It's where everybody gets together and stays together. One of the things that I tell birth moms is the definition is it's like a family reunion. It's like where everybody comes together and stays together. And I feel like every time I tell a birth mom that they really get it from that point. They realize, okay, I see what that is all about. It's not, it's not me going and getting a child. It's not me having more than once a year. It is that definition of a family reunion. And, our family reunions are once a year, once every other year kind of thing. And so I feel like that really helps birth moms to get a handle on what that aspect of open adoption is all about.
Yeah, I keep what the thread I keep hearing is that adoptive parents and birth mothers start out usually a little more reserved about how they feel about open adoption until they actually get to know each other, and then it sort of blossoms.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
to wrap up tonight, there was a question that came in that I also wanted to add while we were talking about visits. Um, I'm going to combine two questions. One of them says, is it common to invite my child's birth mother to his or her birthday or a family party? And then another question is, I've heard some families get together for holidays. Is that normal?
Mm. I don't believe that that is a typical, but I will say that birth moms start off by saying, that's what I want. My once a year visits, I want to be there for, on their birthdays. But the birth moms seem to kind of back out of that because I think they realize that one, that visit is going to be so emotional anyway for them, but to be there on a special occasion like that for a birthday or a holiday, it's like amplified, So I think even though these birth moms come into it saying, yeah, I want that once a year visit and I think I want it to be on the child's birthday or at Christmas, it really never evolves to be that. And again, I think it's just because emotionally, I think they realize it's just going to be way too much for them. And I think that's probably a good idea because I tend to agree. I think that would be really heavy on everybody.
Hmm. Yeah, again, it's open adoption. In the old days, you would hear about closed, semi-open, and open adoption. But even back then, what was considered an open adoption might look really conservative to some of the stories we see today. And so that's why I always like to say open adoption doesn't have a checkbox, A, B, or C style or black and white kind of
Hmm.
box. It's it's so unique because the individuals involved are unique um, and different
That's
and
right.
special, and they're going to come with their own stories and their own backgrounds. I will say, as an adoptive parent, it is so important that you be honest about everything you're searching for in your adoption so that you don't get chosen by a birth mother that ultimately leads you to an uncomfortable situation. And that can be with respect to how open you'd feel to being in touch with her, all the way down to other preferences like the race of the child or the age of the child or the health background of that baby.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
it's so
Be
important.
true.
Like what you were saying, Veronica, you mentioned that in the rare instances where a birth mother may want a family, like I helped a family years ago. Birth mother said, I want a family within a 3-hour radius and I want to get together with them. I think she said like 4 times a year. And she had
Hmm.
another laundry list of other checkpoints that those adoptive parents had to meet. And our list narrowed down to 3. So she still had a choice, but we had to reach out to those families and say, what she's looking for is not as common as other women we're helping. So we just want to make sure that if she chooses you, you're not like that you would actually honor that commitment to see her 4 times a year if that's what she wants to follow through with. So we gave those families permission to be presented to those special checklists for her so that they
Mm,
weren't put in a position of, whoa, like that's not what we were expecting, and suddenly they feel really off guard. So we try and communicate all of that before you commit to a match with her because we don't want either side disappointed or frustrated. Um,
exactly.
and so I think what most of you will find is that with all the questions you ask and you listen to more adoption stories, like recent adoption stories, not necessarily 50-year-old adoption stories or necessarily adoption stories that aren't what you're looking for. Like, don't listen to an adoption from China if you're trying to learn what adopting a baby in the US in 2019 looks like. Those are going to be
Hmm.
totally different processes and scenarios and backgrounds for those children. So the more you learn, um, please know that we are happy to answer any questions, and there are no bad questions. Like, we've heard it all. So if you
Yeah.
feel weird asking a question, it's okay. Just ask it. Find a way to ask it, because the sooner you get that off your chest and you find words for that, then you can start learning, okay, is my question or concern valid? Do I need more information? Where do I go from here? So that you can pursue the type of adoption that you want to complete. And you're not just making your adoption decisions based off of fear or stereotypes or outdated information. So we are happy to help over here. Veronica, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, just, I encourage our adoptive families, all adoptive families, to embrace open adoption and to, not be fearful of it, because it's a matching of really of preferences with your birth mom, and they're human. They're compassionate, and they're gonna, birth moms are going to listen to what your preferences are and what you're hoping for, and it will become hopefully a beautiful match between the two parties. So don't be fearful of it, but instead, embrace it. Know that we here at Lifetime are working on your behalf so that you have a wonderful relationship with your birth mom. We don't want to put you in a position where we're expecting you to go above and beyond your comfort zone.
Right.
But know that these women are human, that they're compassionate, that their first and foremost goal is to find a loving family that will treat her child as um, as your own. Really, that's the main thing that they're looking for. And if
Exactly.
it builds up to an open adoption, and these aspects of the different open adoption happen, well, that's icing on the cake. That's
Mhm.
wonderful. And they're all different, so there isn't a black and white answer to all of this, but you've got a whole team here ready to help in any way that we can.
Thank you, Veronica. I wanted to kind of wrap up with this comment from one of our lifetime adoptive moms who has been living with open adoption. She said, I think some people will be surprised how much they actually enjoy and look forward to having visits or contact with their child's birth mother once they actually start that match with her and get to know her. So thank you. Thanks, Lisa, for sharing that. So again,
Hmm.
if any of you have any questions, whether you're already working with us or you're very new to Lifetime, you can always reach out to us. We have lots of ways to contact us. You can email, call, you can message us through social media. Um, and we will be happy to help you with anything we can. If you don't have a coordinator at Lifetime, you can email adopt@lifetimeadoption.com or just call our office 1-800-923-6784, and we'll be glad to at least point you to the person we know can help you. We just want to thank all of you for sharing these questions. We know it's not always an easy topic, or especially easy to share things that you feel like, am I the only one who thinks this? Is this out there? But these were all really great questions and comments coming in tonight. And if you have anything at all that did not get covered tonight and you were thinking, but I have this burning question and you didn't answer it, please reach out to us. We'd love to have it on another webinar or answer it one-on-one for you too. So We just want to thank all of you for making time to be with us here this evening. And Veronica, thanks again for sharing your experience.
You are welcome. Glad to be here. Thanks, Libby.
All right, we'll talk with all of you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.